and thank you everyone who's here in person, in the flesh, and also in the virtual spaces. I have a lot of familiar faces online and also in the space, and a lot of new faces, so thank you all for being here. And I'd like to start with taking a moment. You're invited to take a moment to feel into the body and close our eyes. I'm nervous. My heart rate is beating quickly. Arriving into the space together, wherever that's at, different parts of the world, or being here in space. And I'd like to start by saying that today I am here at the University of California, Santa Barbara, which was founded upon unceded lands of the Chumash peoples. I am in process of learning more about the violence, erasures, denials, and healing dynamics of this space and the surrounding areas of these lands that I am unfamiliar with still. I have a lot to learn and change, which will be a lifelong process that I want to commit to. I respect the continued connections with the past, the present, and the future, as well as our capacity to meet here today, in the person and virtually, and to celebrate our connection that we have, in sharing, learning, and expanding our perspectives through this encounter that is relational from the get-go. I want to thank UCSB, MAT Seminar Series, Nefeli and Yasin for getting this fire kindled and going. I'd like to also thank Marco, who was like, let's do this in a few weeks. I'm like, I'm getting married, and he's like, we can do it. I'd like to thank Alan Macy for the person who brings all of these encounters and people together to sort of make all these kindles turn into full flames and heat. And most importantly, I want to thank my collaborator, Ryan McCullough, who's my loving partner. And really, research to me is never in an individual. Research is about the encounter. It's about all the experiences that I've had in my life that have been predetermined, that have been shifted and changed by encounters with many of you in this space, right here, many of you online. So research to me this is something that I'm sharing, but it's not mine. It's never mine to hold. It's really always in a flux with all of the encounters, the materials, the people, my ancestors. And it will be changed by our event today. So thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting me into your space that really seems to support, I'm new here, but it seems to support a wide variety of eclectic researches. I've asked some of you here what your researches are, and it's really exciting to be in a space where there's different alchemies happening because we're all coming from different areas. And I get really excited about what is possible from these encounters. Let's see, I am Danielle, and I identify as a white, cis female. That comes with implications, that comes with histories, that comes with a lot of doors that have opened for me because of my body, my background, my ancestry, and I want to acknowledge that. And I'm working hard to learn more and more about that, and to learn more about how I can be somebody who takes the privileges I've been afforded and to make changes and shifts wherever I can and support spaces to be more diverse and shifting. My ancestry is complex. My great-grandma, my yaya, came from Greece. She helped raise me. She was illiterate. I was born and raised in Chicago to two working-class parents. My dad was an electrician. My mom is a hairstylist, has her own business. I'm the first in my family to attend university at all. I have lived primarily in Chicago, Colorado, France, Montreal, and now I call Santa Barbara one of my homes. I'm also identifying as a dancer, primarily. I am a body-based artist. I find a lot of knowledge that comes from the body. I also don't think that embodied experiences are universal. I don't believe that this experience that we're going to have today in our bodies is something that we're magically going to share and understand each other through our bodies. I think relationality and embodiment is extremely complex. We have a lot of different experiences, so these are one of the problematics that I will talk about as we move through with this embodied practice. I'm doing 2 PhDs currently, but I have to say it's not double the work. I'm doing a co-tutelle, which is a joint agreement between Concordia University and the University of Montpellier in France. So I'm doing an interdisciplinary humanities research creation program. So my research is really focused on creation that's in dialogue with a lot of different theories. But I'm also making with a lot of different folks and really believe that what we create creates new ways of knowing and knowledge. I'm always interested in positionality, where we're coming from, and how our positionalities affect our subjectivities. I'm very skeptical of objectivity. My performance work really shifted. I've been an international performing artist that was really aesthetically based. And my work shifted is an important moment. My father passed away really young at 47 of a heart attack. So in 2011. And that really changed my trajectory, and I share that because my research is heart-based. So I'm really fascinated I became fascinated with how the work I was doing as a performance artist was limiting me. Like, I wasn't able to connect with people through my aesthetics or through the fourth wall of performance. So I became more interested in creating interactive or sort of connecting possibilities with the public or with different artists. I didn't really know how to do that. I ended up going to get my MFA in dance at CU Boulder, where I had amazing mentorship. I also became more immersed in somatics, specifically Alexander technique, where I really honed through Neda Diachenko, who passed away 2 years ago, really a pillar of the Alexander technique community, honed this capacity to, through the hands of my teacher, so through touch, how to learn to sense the really intricate habits of my body, pause, and try to redirect habits in my body. It's really slow work, and it takes a really long time. So through that, and also body-mind centering, another somatic practice that started with Bonnie Brainbridge Cohen in Berkeley. It's still like a really, really full learning experience of different systems of the body. So those are my somatic practices. There's so many techniques, encounters, and different ways of exploring the body in interdisciplinary research. I really find my interest lie in creating rhizomatic roots. Through Deleuze, Guattari, these ideas of non-traceability, but trying to trace at the same time. Non-absolute, but trying to touch and to hear and to listen to the things that are impacting and influencing me constantly. Okay. Some of the credit I really want to give are to my directors. And my directors are Angélique Willkie, who's currently residing in Montreal, from Jamaica, lives in Brussels for a really long time. Erin Manning, those who know, who wrote Politics of Touch, does a lot of research in process philosophy, and a lot of research right now around, as a white body, talking about dynamics with blackness, working with Fred Moten, Tina Comte, also neurodiversity, which has really impacted the way that I'm going to be talking about polyvagal theory, which I often find to be very non-neurodiverse. VK Preston, who is coming from performativity, queerness, indigenous studies. And then Alix de Morant is my director in France, who's coming from phenomenology. Some of the researchers I'm really interested in at the moment are Resma Menachem, Bonnie Brainbridge Cohen, Stephen Porges, Erin Manning, Edward Glissant, Brian Massoumi, Sarah Ahmed from Queer Phenomenology. So the research that we're going to be feeling through today and moving through today is through a process I have called tethering. This is a aerial fabric. My training in aerial comes from a rigged fixed point in the ceiling. Has anybody in here seen aerial performances before? Done aerial performances? I became really interested, actually it was in Santa Barbara, in an aerial festival, with who can access vertical fabrics, who cannot access vertical fabrics, and what does it mean when I want to interact with people through performance if I only have a vertical space. So I remember the moment that I started to shift that, and I created this horizontal loop, and I became interested in what if, instead of a fixed point in the ceiling, bodies that are movable, that are different, that are in different capacities become the movable rigging points, the always shifting points of connection between. So instead of the aerial being vertical on the ceiling, the aerial becomes horizontal and is through our movement together that we create some sort of like amenable sort of unfolding process of attachment and relationality. I did have a Fulbright to France in 2017 and 18, and during that time I was really interested with grief, because my own grief that I experienced, and the main feeling I had was that like life was just going on, and yet I had this like pain of loss. And I became curious of like, when I read the news and I hear about all of this pain and loss, there's so much happening in the world all the time. How do I connect to that? And often I don't. Like I read a story, I don't even know how to feel around it. How does it touch me? How does it not touch me? What are my biases? What are my preferences around sort of news media interactions? So during this time of research, I was trying to create movement responses to news stories evolving around grief. And this is where it gets really important. I felt really icky doing so. This notion of empathy, it didn't have consent. So who am I to take someone's story and try to respond to it? I don't have their consent. I don't even know what that means. And what is this relation between me and somebody else in these moments of grief that I don't quite understand? So I started to get more curious around where is consent at play in empathy, in relation. And then I got more curious and started to understand that consent is super problematic. We're in a moment where consent has become more present, but it's still not present enough. How we interact in space, and I don't mean consent just sexually, I mean consent of how we enter into spaces, how we learn together, how we move together, how we create together, interdisciplinary collaboration. As I started to open my work more to interdisciplinary collaboration, it wasn't to like try to learn a whole bunch of chops and skills. It's honoring the different knowledges that others hold. And then what happens when we come together and we want to create something and we make and do things according to what the work is asking for. So it's really listening and letting things emergently unfold. But in those processes, I find that consent is really problematic. We go fast. We don't have a lot of time, especially as artists or in trying to apply for grants, trying to get space, trying to be in university, wherever we're coming from. Where is the timing for consent? What does that actually mean? How many of us have actually engaged in a collaborative or a classroom experience where we actually think and have the time to talk about consent? And that's where my questions came in, and I don't. These are things I've been practicing and curious about now for years, and I feel like it's so hard for me to have, and I have a lot of training in my body with somatics, or like sensing interoceptively my body or its relation to the environment. It is so hard for me to know where I'm at any given moment. Do I want this? Do I not want this? Do I want to move here? Do I not want to move here? Do I want to lean into this? Do I trust? Do I not trust? These things happen so quickly, and I find that with the trainings I've had, if it's hard for me, I get curious about how it is for others, and I don't want to assume. So not assuming the way that others feel, or assuming that we all can communicate in the same range of expressions. These are the these are the cruxes of the research. It's never going to end. My research is not about finding answers, it's about being in process. It's about how do we look at these notions of consent, embodiment. What does empathy even mean? I don't know. I think there's a lot of questions. So I'm not looking to do research and prove something. I'm looking to do research to be in process. My research is always changing. As I said from the beginning, what we do today is going to change the research. It's a different group of people, different bodies, different time of the year, different time of the day. All of these things matter. So the polyvagal theory has been something that I've become more and more curious. Ryan's also introduced me a lot to the polyvagal theory. I've also been studying with folks in Montreal like Kelly Keenan, who the worksheet that you have, it's cited. This was created by Mouse and Kelly Keenan. They were doing research specifically around how to engage with sensing our nervous system states in relational movement practices. So we have polyvagal theory, which was started by Stephen Porges, which is, it's still way over my head, and I'm still very new. Within the last few years I've been studying this. There's a lot for me to learn. Some of you in this room might know a lot more about it than I do, or online. But the idea is that we have different nervous system states. And it's not just the brain to the body, it's also the organs in the body that are influencing the brain and how we're responding. So if you kind of peruse this worksheet, you might sense right now, where, intuitively or listening to your body, how do you feel? How is your heart beating? I'll get to it in a moment. But if you were to say I'm in maybe you go a high nervous system state, a medium, or a low. There's so many ways to think about how we are in our nervous systems. You have, according to polyvagal, there's really 5 total, but 3 important ones are ventral. Ventral is usually when we feel quote-unquote safe. I do not believe in a safe space. I don't believe in brave spaces or safe spaces. I can always try to get closer and closer to create safe spaces, but I tell you right now, this is not a safe space. There's no way that I can know what any of you need for this to be a safe space. I can know what I need, and I can project into this space what I think is safe, but I have no idea what any of you need, but I can try. I can try really hard, and I can learn more. A brave space, I'm not asking any of you to be brave either. I'm asking you to be here and to sense and to listen and to respond and react in ways that you need to. And also, if that means leaving the space, that's totally welcome. If that means going under the desk or going into different places, this is how I know you teach my English composition classes, you can do so. The space is a place to experiment, also to say no. To say no thank you for right now, or to say yes, to say maybe. But again, I am very critical of what we mean when we say we're creating a safe space, because how do we know what's safe for somebody or not? So then we have these nervous system states. And then I'm like, okay, how do I apply this to a movement practice to connect with people? How do we create connection? Can I create a space where we're all in this ventral state, which is supposedly a safe state where we have more of a regulated system? Regulated is also a really problematic word. Regulated to what? Usually non-neurodiverse bodies that are able to communicate in certain ways within their movement. So if we bring ourselves to this place of okay, we're here together, we can all feel safe, I don't think that's possible. But what I ask is that we tune into the heart. This is what I'm really curious about. If we start to pay attention to our heartbeat, is that sort of an access point to our nervous system states? So, I might have an overall sense of how my nervous system is, with my voice, my eyes shifting around, my perspiration, my arousal, my breath, my heartbeat, my ability to connect, or how quickly I'm moving or slowly I'm moving. But I'm really curious if I can use the heart really specifically. And that's probably because of my history with my father, with curiosity around, I remember being in there was a neurofield, was it like Ellen, you might remember this, there was a neurofield conference in 2020. And I remember there was a woman there who was reading people's pulses, and she came and read my pulse, and she said, "Oh yeah, you have a typical American pulse. It's not that strong." And I was like, okay, I'm really curious about this. And so I think also this curiosity of, am I even connected to my heart? Like, what does that mean? What does it mean for you to feel a connection to your heart? Are we connected to our hearts without being conscious of it? How do we become more aware of it? And again, I cannot assume anything about where all of you are at, or what your relationships are with your heart, nor do I want to. And I am interested in how we create an encounter together, to sense our own bodies, and then also how we learn to co-sense. And I believe that is a practice. That does not happen magically. All of us come into a space, and we're going to start moving, and our bodies are going to create some sort of universal language for all of us to understand. There's a book called The Natural Body and Somatics by Doran George, which talks a lot about somatics as having eugenic sort of undercurrents and roots. These ideas of what is a natural body. And it's also really complex. So I'm not asking us to be a certain way or to sense our bodies, or that we have a natural way of connecting to our hearts. I'm asking us, like, the same question is, like, if I learn to sense my heart in these relational settings, what does that do in my relation? And then how do I communicate different states that I'm in? So essentially the research has become around these two things. What happens when I start to sense and give myself the time and the space and the focus to sense my heart? And if I do, how does that change the relational dynamic in the space and create more capacity and expressions to communicate? Not assuming we can all say, I don't want this right now, or I do want this right now, or that we're able to give an embodied yes, no, maybe. What are the ranges of expression that we have that are always evolving and shifting? It's complex, and I don't know if there will ever be an answer. I think it's always going to be adapted to the space we're in. Erica Nichols is an artist from Toronto who does work specifically around consent and dance practices. And according to them, they, in some workshops I was doing with them a few years ago, that consent, to have a group of people and to actually have a practice of consent, it takes years. And that's if, like, you're able to come together, work consistently, do really deep research. So imagine, like, all of us in this space right now for 45 minutes, and then we're supposed to have some kind of consent practice. But I'm curious, I want to keep reaching for it. I want to keep reaching for it, even though I don't know if it's possible. Okay, so working with Ryan has really opened up different possibilities in terms of biometrics. There also are problematics with technology. And can I ask you to say a few words about what you're working on?
Well, thanks for allowing me to be here. I don't want to take up too much of your time because I want you to be the focus. My contribution to our collaboration has been also with the help of Alan, about making technology that senses the heart. And I think through my collaboration with Danielle, I think I've also become more aware of the ethics of doing so. Finding, I don't think we interact with technology it's in one way. I think there's also a giving back of technology towards us. Sometimes it allows us to sense deeper in our bodies. I think also sometimes it creates more of a disconnect. interact with technology and interpret it in ways that lead us into different paths, learn different things about our bodies. I think ultimately, I think this journey with technology has just created more questions, and I think this is a ongoing life or course of life.
Thank you.
No.
Beautiful. And some things that have come up with the technology, this is in Montreal, this was in February at the Milieu Institute. We did a collaboration with 45 different artists, opera singers, musicians. They were using the heartbeat technology that Ryan created to compose digitally and create a sound score. There was also dancers, opera singers, and we were all basing the movements of the 2-hour-long performance around the rhythms of 3 different heartbeats during the piece and how that affected all of us in the performances. We realized pretty quickly that hearing our heartbeats in technology was extremely vulnerable. Actually, there was a panic attack that happened as well. There was a lot of different responses to hearing the heartbeat amplified. There was a lot of different responses in the performance space as well. So we came up with new criteria during the performance as well. So we were going to have the public come up and they were going to be able to offer their heartbeats, and we learned really quickly through the week-long residency before that is not ethical. I couldn't do that because I don't think, I don't know how people are going to respond. So I had to really work, it's going to take years to develop ways to allow people to come into the technology in a way that is not safe, again, but is an invitation where it can be a little bit more cared for. So care is a really big aspect of the work. I'll skip that. So we've done a lot of different collaborations, even in the last year, around using heartbeats in live performance. So the theme and structure, this research creation project is really interesting. This idea of what are the different rhythms that our heartbeats are creating. So another thing that's really important in this research is as we start to sense and co-sense together our hearts and move together, I'm not looking for us to sync our heartbeats. I'm asking us to stay with our own rhythms and to allow the dynamic rhythms and differences to be present in this space. So I'm not looking for homogeny, I'm looking for difference. And a lot of how do we be in a space and allow for a lot of textures and rhythms, and rather than trying to amalgamate us all into doing one rhythm together. So as we start to move, slowness is really important. And we're actually, the framework that I'm going to do the practice with us today is based on the three movements of the heart, which is tension or compression, a release, and a rest. And that's trying to frame ways that we can pause and then check in and sense, okay, where's my body at? Where's my heartbeat at? How do I feel in this relation? Do I want to move closer? Do I want to move further apart? So there's 2 aspects of this research in the body process. It's spatially, how close and far do I want to be to material, to other bodies? And rhythmically, am I going too fast? Do I need to slow down? So I'll be guiding some of that. There'll be parameters such as there's no physical touch with another body, but this is our conduit of touch. The fabric becomes a touch extension, but also the floor becomes a touch extension, the air in the room, the breath that we're having in the space. It's all effective. Okay. I wanted to show a few more things. The idea of vulnerability. How many of you in this space identify as movers? And there's so many definitions, And those of you over there, you're going to be moving with us too. There are so many definitions of movement and like what that means in our bodies. And how many of you in this space like consider the body to be, your body to be an important aspect or consideration in your research? Somewhat. What happens to your body in the research? Or how does it affect the research? Something to consider. So a performance that I did at the 30th anniversary of an international performance, aerial festival, Ryan created 4 of these things that he has on his finger. What are they called?
Pulse oximeter.
Pulse oximeters. And there were 4 performers who were on stage with me, a proscenium stage, so that in these proscenium environments, how do I still connect with the public? And how do I still create this like sort of permeable atmosphere between us? So they had 4 heartbeats going, and they were all different rhythms, but I found that they were kind of like waves. When I looked at the audience, like there's a moment where I'm upside down and I'm just, for a long time, and engaging with the audience, their heartbeats go up. So they're responding to my heartbeat. My heartbeat is being read by a loop in this performance by someone else on stage. So the audience is also knowing what my heartbeat is doing. So if I inverted, my heartbeat went down. If I looked at the audience, my heartbeat went up. If I knew people in the audience on certain nights, my heartbeat was like way higher than nights that I didn't know anyone in the performance audience. It was lower. The 4 people on stage, their heartbeats were very reflective of what I was doing. I would look at them, their heartbeats would go up, and then we'd have a moment, and then they would come back down. It was like there was like horses running, but yet they were in like a wave together. So that was it was a really beautiful experience. This is a piece I did recently in Montreal, again with the same technologies, and there was 3 of us tethering with a really thin fabric. And there were audience members that were selected and we worked with throughout that day to be able to use the technology, feel comfortable with the technology, and their heartbeats were changing during what we were doing in the performance. So I'm really interested in like what does it mean for me as a performer, a mover, to hear someone else's heartbeat? What does it mean for me to pay attention to my heartbeat and hear someone else's heartbeat? Can I sense your heartbeats without it being amplified through technology? There's times where my heartbeat does not work with this technology. It usually works with, I think it depends on different body types. And that's like really unnerving. When his heartbeat works in the system and then my heartbeat doesn't work, that's super scary. And that few times, like that's been really upsetting. Or the people who you try the heartbeat technology with, and theirs aren't as strong sounding, and some people's are really strong sounding. For many different factors, it can be very unnerving. So I thought the technology was going to be a way to help enhance, and I'm curious. It's a moment of curiosity. This is a piece that Ryan and I performed at SB Cast during an MAT event recently, where he was hooked up to his heart box that was changing depending on how I was interacting with him. So as we move into the movement portion, can we co-sense the dynamic and multiplicitous rhythms of hearts beating in the room you are in? Just maybe what happens when our hearts meet, these ideas of magnetic fields around our hearts, and what happens when they start to come close. Can we sense that? Or not. And hearts open and close. They're there to protect and there to open, and it's allowing all of that to be present. This is not a yes and movement experience. This is a no, this is a maybe, it's an I don't know most of the time. So I'm going to ask us, if you like, you can take your shoes off, or you can keep them on. But I'm going to ask you to find a space in the room. It can be in the hallway. It can be anywhere. It can be in the beanbag. It can be somewhere connected to the space that you feel called to be. We're going to find a place and we're going to lie down or sit or stand. You really get to choose. but we're going to close our eyes. And then we're going to start this movement practice with this fabric. And what's going to happen with the fabric is we're going to twist it up just a little bit, kind of like a cat's cradle. We're going to create a tension. And that tension is like the tension of that heartbeat. So we're going to find a tension together. And then from there, we're going to go into a practice where we're going to soften into our back. So soften the front of our heart space to kind of give in and lean into the tension of the fabrics. And my proposal is that allows us to really sense each other's movement through the fabrics, rather than containing like a rigidity in my body, but a softening. And then from there, we're going to rest and we're going to really sense our bodies and like what our heartbeats are doing and how they're changing. And then we have options, moving, leaving the space, coming closer, going further. This is an experiment with each other. So I thank you for all trying, and trying in any capacity. This is not like an A+ if you like get into the fabrics and go bananas. This is really about how do you sense where you're at and how challenging it can be to even know where we're at, and how challenging it can be to act on that. Intimidating to be the one who's like, I'm not comfortable with that. But it's so hard. It is so hard and really problematic. But this is a way to practice and to be together and just to co-sense. Yes? All right, so it's gonna get stinky in here with some socks off or some shoes off. Find a space in the room that you feel called to. The lights are gonna go dimmer and we're gonna move together. Okay. So feel free to really like this space. It's you can walk around a moment, kind of get to know it. This is a really new space for me. Some of you might feel a lot more familiar with it. There's a lot in here. There's a lot of people. And also it's an invitation to be uncomfortable. If it's uncomfortable, we're here together. But I don't want to ask you to be in a place you don't want to be.
Not inside.
You can be inside the circle. You can totally be in the circle.
And close our eyes.
You're going to close your eyes. If you'd like to close your eyes.
But we need to be close to the fabric.
You can start close or away, but you can keep moving throughout the whole time.
Okay.
No, I'm gonna go there. There's a whole lot of stuff in my
But yeah, feel free. You can come into the circle too. You can move outside the circle.
Don't step on it.
It's kind of the practice of being like, oh, this is really awkward. I don't know what to do, and that's okay. In the background, you're going to hear Ryan's heartbeat. Wherever you're at, if you feel comfortable, if you're not ready to close your eyes, it's not necessary. Pauline Olivero says the breath is the gateway to the nervous system, to the heart. We can start by sensing our breath. And notice if you can feel any sort of pulse or rhythm inside your body. And it's totally okay if you can't. That can take a lot of practice and time as well. If you just tune in, what rhythms do you sense internally? all noises are okay. And dance is a little more acceptable. Don't worry about any noises that come out of the body. You're exhaling, breathing, your bodies. You can relax the eyeballs, the jaw. Maybe you sense into the throat, pulse, the chest. The stomach. Hips. The digestion happening in the space. Knees, the toes. There's no right or wrong. It's just how are you doing? How are you feeling? And is there a way to sort of slow the thoughts down, letting them be there? That's what our brain does. But allowing us to sense in the body, opening up that perception, the interoception. A moment of intimacy, stillness with the self. It's okay if slowness feels awkward. And again, I thank you all for being here and trying this. There's space just to be grateful for your own bodies, for being here together, and all that might be coming up from what was said today. If you'd like to, you can place your hand somewhere if you're having a hard time feeling your heartbeat or your pulse. Sometimes I like to place my hands on my tummy or on the side of my neck, my wrist. And also sometimes sensing the heartbeat can be a lot. And you don't have to either, of course. And just start to sense like your body, as you're sensing internally, as you start to move out, you bring your awareness more outside of the body. How far does that go? What if that's not impossible? What if that is possible? The energy, what is the space of your energetic body? Your heartbeat, where does it go to? The heart is the relational organ, according to Bonnie Brainbridge Cohen. As it senses through the space, can you sense any other heartbeats? Maybe you hear Ryan's heartbeat. But can you feel sort of, maybe there's openings and closings you feel in the space? And just noticing how far physically and or energetically are you from others in this space? You're close to the floor, you're close to your clothes on your skin, but how close are you to other bodies in the space? And notice if you want to get closer or further or keep a sort of distance. Just notice. It's all about noticing. able to identify your feelings, your sensations. I often find they're too complex for me to even begin, but I try to see what I can taste or can feel. And then you're slowly, we're going to start to find a new space in the room. It can be a tiny movement. It could be, I don't want to go very far, I want to stay here, and you could you make that choice. It can be the smallest movement. You also can start to move differently in the space, or maybe you want to go somewhere else in the space. So this is the place of, okay, we're going to shift the space. And it's an opportunity, it's a practice to be able to make different choices. So we're sensing, and then what choice do we want to make with our movements? And if you are interested in touching the fabrics, that can be a choice. If you're interested in touching the walls or a chair, I ask that you do not touch any other bodies in this space. But you can touch the beanbag, your own clothes. And if you are interested in the fabric, you can be interested in 1 minute and then the next moment not. It's always in flux. This is a practice of flux. And if you are not wanting to touch it right now, then you get the urge, you are welcome to do so. And with the fabric, what we're going to be trying to search for is tension. So, there's a lot of us on this fabric. I'm going to try to I'm going to do a little swirly do. You have permission to get in there. And what we're looking for in the fabric, either with hands, with body parts, we're looking to find tension and pause. So the 3 rhythms of the heartbeat: tension, release, and rest. I'm going to bring some of those in over the next 10 minutes, but you also can do those patterns on your own. Check in. All right. Where am I at? Oh, I don't like this. I don't want this. Okay. I'm going to go. Or I don't know if I like this or not. I don't know. That's also okay. And just try to stay and listen to what your body needs. And just what happens if you come back to the heartbeat. Doesn't that matter? Bye. What it looks like, the dance training I love to do, how does it feel? There's no aesthetic prescriptions. This becomes its own aesthetic. I'm not saying it's aesthetic-less. We're trying to find tension. Yes, this is PhD research. Right here. And the fabric becomes this conduit where we already are relating. This fabric is like a physical manifestation of what's already happening in a relationality. I'm already sensing your body. But this is a way I'm okay, now I can tangibly feel the connection in a different way. So it's already happening in the space. But the question is, how do we... It's like kindergarten. It's like a parachute. It's like a way to play, but yet taking it seriously in a way of do I want to be in this parachute? Or do I want to be in it in a different way? And no guilt if you don't know. It's hard, I find. The fabric can open, it can close, you can stand up, you can lay down. Try to follow what you feel that you want to do, knowing we're in a relational space. So what movements we do affect each other and they affect the space. I might want to just seek pleasure and just like, oh yeah, I'm going to go for this, but this is not that specifically. We're in a carefully sensitive relational space. What I do affects others, and I don't know how. Feel free to go in and out of auditory or taste or smell or touch, tactile or visual. Letting there be different sorts of like ways to sense the relationality. And we go slow. We try to sense our hearts, how do you meet the others? And if anybody wants to go and try the heart sensor, they can go to Ryan and also try that. But I want you to be aware that it might not work. Make sure to breathe in a way that you can feel and sense in your bodies. It's okay to get a little weird. And let's pause. Taking the time. Like, how do you check in? What's happening internally? Are you where you want to be? How does your heart feel? I really don't even know right now. So like, they're questions, but I don't know. And then how would you express it? Would you express your state right now? Is it even possible? And then let's take the opportunity to release and shift. So if there's this kind of like a reset. You can stay here, you can change, but it's an opportunity to actually make space and time to rearrange the space, your position, your distance. And the fabrics can be changed. If you have a desire to change them, you can. Finding tension, leaning away so that we can connect. So what is that paradox? Tension for connection. How do we find connection through tension so we can sense? How do we sense this relationality? Oh yeah. Get some of that tension. Are you where you want to be? Remember checking in with the breath? Is your tension sustainable? So if your tension's in your fingertips, so they're getting sore, remember you have this space to know that it's hard, but you can rearrange your tension. We're starting to get a little movement going. Let's pause. Oh yeah. It's okay to stop the momentum when we're practicing consent. You can pick it right back up. How are you doing? Can you sense your heartbeats? How is your rhythm? What is your distance between others? Is it okay? Do you not know? Again, a chance to reshape, reshift, release. Go ahead. So we did our tension, our rest, and our release. Find that tension. And it's about how do we support ourselves and others. And we might not know how to support others. Again, it's not a safe space. This can be very slippery. You can slip in and out. Bodies, feel the bodies, maybe close your eyes. What do you sense? So relying on different sensory experiences. You got Graham's heartbeat over there happening, driving the space. And let's rest. Release and shift. Opportunity. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? If you don't know, if you want to stay, that's okay. How can you support the tension? Got some new heartbeats going in. Can you sense your own heartbeat? How do you support the tension? And notice the different heartbeats. They're so different. Do they remind you to feel your own, or do they take you out of it? And pause, rest. And this tension. You feel like as you bend in the fabrics, as we're out of the fabrics, how is the space between, how are our distances or what we're interacting with, how is that still present? Are you in a distance that you want from others? Are you able to check in with yourself and stay relational? Are you able to express like how your nervous system is doing based on your heartbeat? And go ahead, release and move. We'll have a few more minutes, so get what you need. You want to get in the fabrics. You want to try your heartbeat. How are you co-sensing the space with others? Can you? Do you have any idea what the energy is from the others in this space? And slowing down. You feel your heartbeat. No, not at all. No. Letting the awkward be together the silences, the uncertainties, allowing there to be the time, the rhythm, and the distance. We're going to take another minute, and then we're going to slowly come together and have just about 5 minutes to kind of wrap things up. But even in this transition, how do we keep that awareness, or trying to be aware of what's happening in the body? And through our relationality, how are the fabrics a sort of maybe a tool? They're very active. So how are they helping us sense these different ways of relationality that carry beyond touching them directly? Yeah, get into that body. MAT. And as we come to the transition, to pause the practice, let's take one more rest. And I'd like you to find one more release into the space wherever that wants to be. So for a final reflection, whether that's connected to the fabrics, whether it's more in a circle, a little gathering, whether you want to be under the desk or out of the space, whatever you need, allowing that transition to happen. So making, even if we don't actually have choice, we're practicing like we do have choice. To go into the space. Isn't it beautiful? And before we start to reflect in sort of maybe verbal expressions, or just take a moment to feel invited to close your eyes and just really check in with like where is your nervous system state? Is it even possible to start to sense? For me, I really don't know. I'm way too external at this moment with all of you to drop in that much. But see how it is for you. See how it is with your heartbeats. If that's a way in or if there's another way in. What felt okay? How did your nervous system transition? What didn't feel okay? And what does that even mean? Is there anything that's lingering for you in terms of consent, in terms of sensing or co-sensing? Anything you want to bring with you or things you want to be curious about? Again, I practice this a lot, and I feel like the more I practice, the more complex it becomes. So it's a research that isn't looking for an answer. It's a research that's looking to always, its consistency is its adaptability. And just thank you all so much for having me in your space. That's already a sacred space for all the work that you all make and you all create and bring. For making these things possible. It's so lovely to meet new people. It feels really good to have a new community, and for those of you who I know and love already, it's so lovely to have you here in the space, bringing your warmth and your curiosity. And if it feels okay, thanking your own body, that wherever you're at in your own journeys, to try something different. I know that for me, it's not easy. So I don't know how it is for you, but thank you for that vulnerability today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for making the spaces possible, bringing encounters and interactions like these together.
Very happy to have you.
It's risk, so I appreciate it. And I just want to take a moment, if anybody, then the question is, how do you translate, right? Erin Manning, Ryan McCullough talk a lot about these ideas of what is language? So how do we even begin to express these experiences? And that's where it gets really interesting, especially in a PhD. Does writing or does the translation to a certain or particular kind of language suffice? Where does it fall short? And in the process of developing ways of many types of expressions, also in neurodivergent sort of wonderings and curiosities of a spectrum of expressions. So if anybody has anything that they want to share, either with the group or also after, you can come and talk to me, or email, reach out. We can also have a coffee. And again, your presence is shifting and shaping the research. It always will be like that. So are there any thoughts that anybody wants to share or dance or move?
I'm sure I would, but I had to be at a chair's meeting doing stuff, and so I missed the beginning of what you said. Can you, if it doesn't interrupt your flow, can you reframe some of the provocation or the sort of origin?
Yes. So a curiosity around what it means to connect in relationality and what that means in terms of consent. So the complexities of different bodies having different needs, different ways of how we work in a space together. And my curiosity is, how do we sense in our own bodies our nervous system states and then express them? And I'm using the heart as one way to sort of sense, and it's complex. We have a heart enthusiast right here, Alan, right? The complexity of emotions, the complexity of my heartbeat can be beating really quickly. It doesn't mean that I'm not in a ventral, according to polyvagal theory, state where I want to relate. So it's one way of sensing my heart, physically through the beat, also emotionally. Does it want to open and close in the space? Are there times where I want to back away? But also the assumption of consent is extremely complex and problematic, I find. So also using technologies that Ryan has developed. So ways of amplifying the heart, which I thought would really help the process. And it causes a lot of anxiety for a lot of folks to hear their heartbeat. Or my heartbeat doesn't even register with this technology. His does, or depending on bodies. So it's the complexities around ethics. With heartbeat, with consent. This is like a dance practice where it's like a touch extension in a way to sort of sense relationality, and using the 3 phases of the heartbeat to create a framework and a methodology to slow down our timing together, try to process what's happening, and then form a sort of system of communications, spectrum of communications that can work as a sort of guidance for interdisciplinary collaborations around having a very strong, present, consensual practice. It doesn't have to be specifically with touch. It can be with, I imagine, I work with dancers, but I work predominantly not with dancers in these practices. And then how this becomes something we feel in our bodies, but then how does that relate to, we're sitting here away from it, do we still sense how close, how far, how we're able to relate, how we're able to co-sense and sense our own bodies?
Thank you. Since I walked in late, let me sort of share the impression.
Yeah.
The word that comes to mind and that resonates with what you just said was integration. That basically through a technology, I mean, there's technology, but that's also technology.
Yes, absolutely.
So that technology, I think, was really intriguing to me because it didn't force anybody to do anything, but it made possible for everyone to integrate everyone else's movement and make a decision whether or not to amplify it or resist it or counterbalance it. And then that took form in whatever everybody and everybody did. But I think what intrigues me more, and it's actually part of why this space is as it is that a simple device like that makes us conscious, brings to our attention relations that are always there anyway. Like, everyone felt it with this technology. But in point of fact, and I think you were making the point about where everybody was when they stopped. Right now, there's connective tissue between all of us, just running around the room, that most of the time we're not paying attention to.
Right.
But right now, and until we forget, we can be. Like I'm saying this, and as I'm saying it, I'm just seeing these rolls of fabric just kind of tracing through all of us. It's very vivid to me.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're intending.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought that was great.
Yeah, great. And it's interesting because because I come from a dance background and somatic background, the more I do this work, the more sensitive I become.
Right.
So I find myself actually, in general in life, and it's tricky at this moment, like where I need more boundary. Because the more sensitive I become with my own body, the more sensitive I am to interacting with others. And so it's making these choices where I find myself like, I'll be on the street, or I'm, on a phone call or whatever it is, and if there's a lot of closing that's come out of this practice, a lot of no, and I want that to be present because it's as I've learned to connect more to myself and connect more to others, there's times where there's openings, and there's a lot of times where there's closings, and it's okay. I have really good therapists that helps me through all of that. And it's these ways of tension is what's really interesting, because tension is a way for me to sense better, and it doesn't mean that there needs to be a leaning into or necessarily a leaning away, but it can be many things. And I want to have that space. I'm trying to figure out how to keep finding more space for there to be more experiences, because I only have my own. Again, somatics, embodiment, not universal. We don't have this like magic way of sensing each other. It's really like, I find that we have more differences, and I honor those differences, and honor and celebrating the differences in this space without forcing. But it's not like I don't want to walk out of here like, oh my God, we're so happy. Maybe that was. And there's times it's euphoric, and then there's times where I'm like, wow, I need space. I need boundary. I need all of these. I need closings, turning away from. So it's interesting where it's like, how do we have that malleability in space? Like, what does it really mean to practice a space with difference? Like, what does that really, really mean? Especially if we're talking a lot about changing systems and creating spaces of decolonization. These are also the way, like the research that I'm really interested with this practice. And it's important to share. But yeah, thank you.
I'll jump in a little bit more. I'm hoping other people will jump in, but I'll fill in the silence a little longer until people warm up and say what they're thinking. Way up there are a couple of drones, quadcopter things, and for a while we had them flying in here under computer control, so we could direct them. And Tim, who would normally be here for this kind of thing, but he's not apparently, had worked with them and had choreographed all these sequences where he could dance with the drone. Basically, not only could we place the drone where we wanted, but we could imbue it with character. So it became it really felt like a living creature. And one of the most interesting things was that depending on its mood, it might follow you around, Or it might sort of inquire, come close to you. And once in a while, it might actually come at you, and we would instantly perceive these things as personality, as character, as aggression, let's say. And that came to mind because the fabric, as you said, gave us tension, but in a kind of controlled way, not in an aggressive way, but basically an elective distancing.
Yeah.
And with that, to us, it's, at worst, if someone pulls away, we feel that they pulled away. Right? But if someone took the same speed and came at us, meaning it wasn't tension, but it was the potential of compression. Compression is instantly alarming, because you can be struck by it. The fabric doesn't have compression. Right? So it actually creates this different relationship. But it really is interesting to think of what if there were a fabric that, most of the time you could stretch, but every once in a while it became rigid, and if you push, then you would push. That would change the whole dynamic.
Totally, yeah. That's a great point. Even because traditionally fabrics are hung from the vertical rig point. You can wrap them and do little cocoons where you have compression. So in a sense, we create this horizontal structure where we become the rig points that are moving. But I have this, this idea that tension as we move away, we actually find that same cocooning in womb, right? The idea of when you're in the womb, you're compressed, but there's tension too. It's both.
Yeah.
You're compressed, but there's tension. When we're pulling away from each other, the pleasure for me is that it's almost like you're leaning back, and there's a trust. If you do a trust fall, you're leaning back, there's tensegrity. And if I'm standing up on my own, or if I'm supporting my own weight, the moment that I trust and lean into the fabric through that tension, so there's all these paradoxes. So I lean into the tension and it supports me. And so there's this way that I'm connecting with you through a distance, through this material that allows me to have more space, time to feel that connection. It's not direct flesh contact, but it's almost like a hug. When we hug, we don't necessarily reach here. We come in and we hold and embrace, and we soften our back spaces. We open our backs to soften. So there's something about this tension where we we go more into the fetal, to the curl, and that's a space of the head, the brain, the heart, the organs connecting. And I think in a lot of body mind centering work, it is to sense the heart. There needs to be a softening of the chest. So there's all these ways of we're leaning away, but to find a sort of connection that's more a trust, in a way to I'm just really interested in more spatial and temporal timing to sense the relationality.
Danielle?
Yeah.
I wanted to briefly mention my experience with the safe space and consent and comfort in the context of this exercise.
Yeah.
So as you were setting the intention for it in advance, I was quite aware there's some number of nameless, faceless people that are watching. That's synchronous. Asynchronously, this was being recorded for the future. Then you let us in to the breathing and then the movement, and that kind of went away for a while. And then my sort of lack of safety at moments was kind of what you just talked about. If I really leaned in, but you set the intention that anyone can release at any time if they feel like it. So I knew there was some danger there, but I also wanted to feel it, so there was that tension. And then afterwards, even now, I think a little bit, okay, I don't care about the synchronous people anymore, we're done. But in a year or 10 years, somebody can be watching everything that just happened on the website. So that was my sort of journey through those issues.
That's really interesting. Did that affect how you were feeling it did it affect when you were in that sort of pause moment, then how you redirected or how you released into the next?
For me personally, the during, I actually released all the synchronous and asynchronous people. I don't know how that was for other people. So it didn't impact me during,
It's also performativity.
Yes.
So you're saying like this could be watched, like who it's the watching on.
It was more performative than it would have been in a completely enclosed space without the tech.
Absolutely.
Just like the class we're going to tonight has a Zoom feature where there are some people participating in other areas, which I think this brings up the same issues.
Totally. Yeah. And performativity is really interesting. And even like as we are in the space together, those who are more familiar with moving or less, it's like what are those levels of comfort of being witnessed, or to see each other, to feel each other moving, all these elements of safety and non-safety within performativity. And yeah, thank you.
I had more thoughts than I can express now, but a few of them, it was interesting to very much reconcile my own embodiment with this exercise as I put more of my body into it. I am a lighter person and was moved. It wasn't, I was like trying to enact tension, but I was also overpowered. And that was an interesting, and then letting myself be overpowered too, which was a consent as well, which was interesting. Like I was being skidded along at one point, and then at one point put more of my body into the fabric and was lifted off the ground, which was it was just fun. Like there's this sort of delight in that as like the childhood sort of like, there's this playfulness. But then also like there was, in being aware of the group dynamics, also literally feeling like a burden, like, oh, people are carrying me, like that's heavy, like I am burdening other people, but then also, well, they're choosing to pick me up, so maybe it's fun for them, or, just all this sort of internal reconciling with the whole group dynamics, and then trying to be aware of like how much I'm pulling, and is this good for the whole group dynamics? Is this helping create a more interesting experience for everyone else? Yeah. And at one point, choosing to try to take up more space. And I was also like operating off the principle of trying to be comfortable. And I sort of, I don't know, mummified myself a bit. Yeah. And, but then when I look up, realized that a lot of people had let go, and I was like, okay, it took too much space. And it was interesting negotiating all those, very much a play of my own body and seeing like I'm overpowered in certain situations and very small, but then in other situations, trying to reclaim some power and strength within that, but then okay, this is an extreme here, how do I rebalance that?
That's really fascinating, this idea of consent as control. That sometimes we don't have the control. So like when does the consent come in? Is it like, I believe we have reaction and response. According to polyvagal theory, that's the window of tolerance. We can't control our reactions. They happen. It's emotion. It's response. It's physical in our bodies. But then what is the response that we have, and how does consent play into that notion of control?
Yeah, and I think another interesting element, because you brought it back to the heart, is I was very aware of my own responsiveness to this and negotiating, and like how if I was relaxed about it, even if I didn't have the control, even if I was like not going to an extreme, how was I relaxed within myself, or was I tensing up in some way, an elevated heart rate, like, ooh, maybe people don't want to be like having an extra weight, or, and it's interesting to have that these things can be decoupled. It can be playful and calm, even if there is a lack of control, even if there is the testing, experimentation of those edges.
Yes. It's relationality, and all that comes up is it's so far beyond anything I can grasp with this research, because we're all gonna feel and sense different things come up. So it's that like, there's no safe space. I can't even begin to think I'm going to create a safe space. And I tell dancers that, this is a very present thing, but I try. And we try. But to assume that you can say what you need or even feel the complexity of sensations that are happening in one moment and then find a way to communicate that, really hard. So thank you for that. Thanks, Alan. Bye. Are there any other thoughts or things that people want to share? And also, again, I'm here after, and I'm available through email and in town. I'd love to hear what it was for you or what comes up. And things might come up, like, I'll get emails, like, months down the road, and like, oh my gosh, this came up. And then so it's all very welcome. Any last thoughts? It's a good thing we're in our bodies. Thank you all so much. Thank you for everybody here for making it work. All the tech, the people who showed up, Ryan, Yasin and Nefeli, making it all work, and all of you being here. It's like really a pleasure to get to know you in this way, and I hope it's not the last, and please stay in touch. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you all so much.